We must not nail ourselves down so firmly to our humors and dispositions. Our principal talent is the ability to apply ourselves to various practices. It is existing, but not living, to keep ourselves bound and obliged by necessity to a single course. The fairest souls are those that have the most variety and adaptability. Here is an honorable testimony to the elder Cato. He had a mind so equally versatile for all things that whatever he was doing, he would say that he was born for that one thing alone. Livy. If it were up to me to train myself in my own fashion, there is no way so good that I should want to be fixed in it and unable to break loose. Life is an uneven, irregular, and multiform movement. We are not friends to ourselves, and still less masters. We are slaves. If we follow ourselves incessantly, and are so caught in our inclinations that we cannot depart from them or twist them about. I say this now because I cannot easily shake off the importunity of my soul, which cannot ordinarily apply itself unless it becomes wrapped up in a thing, or be employed unless with tension and with its whole being. However trivial a subject you give it, it is prone to enlarge and stretch it to the point where it must work on it with all its strength. For that reason, its idleness is a painful occupation for me, and bad for my health. Most minds need foreign matter to arouse and exercise them. Mine needs it rather to settle down and rest. The vices of idleness must be shaken off by occupation. Seneca. For its principal and most laborious study is studying itself. Books are, for my mind, one of the kinds of occupations which entice it away from its study. At the first thoughts that come to it, it stirs about and shows signs of vigor in all directions, practices its touch, now for power, now for order and grace, arranges, moderates, and fortifies itself. It has the power to awaken its faculties by itself. Nature has given to it, as to all minds, enough material of its own for its use, and enough subjects of its own for invention and judgment. Meditation is a powerful and full study for anyone who knows how to examine and exercise himself vigorously. I would rather fashion my mind than furnish it. There is no occupation that is either weaker or stronger, according to the mind involved, than entertaining one's own thoughts. The greatest minds make it their profession. To whom living is thinking. Cicero. Thus nature has favored it with this privilege, that there is nothing we can do so long, and no action to which we can devote ourselves more commonly and easily. It is the occupation of the gods, says Aristotle, from which springs their happiness and ours. Reading serves me particularly to arouse my reason by offering it various subjects to set my judgment to work, not my memory. Therefore, few conversations hold my interest if devoid of vigor and effort. It is true that pleasantness and beauty satisfy and occupy me as much as weight and depth, or more, and inasmuch as I grow sleepy in any other sort of conversation, and lend it only the rind of my attention, it often happens in such abject and feeble sort of talk, small talk, that I make silly and stupid remarks and replies, ridiculous and unworthy of a child, or, still more awkwardly and impolitely, maintain an obstinate silence. I have a dreamy way of withdrawing into myself, and besides, a dull and childish ignorance of many common things. By these two qualities I have earned the honor that 5 or 6 stories can be truthfully told about me, as silly as can be told about any man whatever. Now to go on with my subject, this fastidious disposition makes me hard to please in dealings with men. I have to cull them out on the sorting tray. It makes me ill-fitted for ordinary actions. We live and deal with plain people. If association with them is a burden to us, if we disdain to adjust ourselves to humble and vulgar souls, and the humble and vulgar ones are often as well regulated as the subtler ones. All wisdom is foolish that does not adapt itself to the common folly. We should no longer meddle with either our own affairs or those of others. Both private and public affairs are worked out with these people. The least strained and most natural ways of the soul are the most beautiful. The best occupations are the least forced. Lord, what a favor wisdom does for those whose desire she adjusts to their power. There is no more useful knowledge. According to one's power. That was the refrain and a favorite saying of Socrates, a saying of great substance. We must direct and fix our desires on the easiest and nearest things. Is it not a stupid humor of mine to be out of tune with 1,000 to whom I am joined by fortune, whom I cannot do without, only to cling to 1 or 2 who are not associated with me, or rather to a fantastic desire for something I cannot recapture? My easy-going ways, opposed to all bitterness and asperity, may very well have relieved me of envy and hostility. To be loved, I will not say, but no man ever gave more occasion not to be hated. But the coolness of my dealings has rightly robbed me of the goodwill of many, who are to be excused for interpreting it in another and worse sense. I am very capable of forming and maintaining rare and exquisite friendships, inasmuch as I grasp so hungrily at any acquaintances that suit my taste, and make advances and I throw myself at them so avidly that I hardly fail to attach myself and to make an impression wherever I land. I have often made happy proof of this. In ordinary friendships I am somewhat barren and cool, for my pace is not natural if it is not under full sail. Besides, my fortune, having trained me from my youth for a single perfect friendship, and given me a taste for it, has in truth given me a certain distaste for the others, and has imprinted too deeply on my fancy that friendship is an animal made for company, not for the herd, as that ancient Plutarch said. And furthermore, by nature I find it hard to communicate myself by halves and moderately, and with that servile and suspicious prudence that is prescribed to us for association in these numerous and imperfect friendships. And it is prescribed to us especially in these times when we cannot talk about the world except with danger or falsely. Yet I see clearly that whoever, like myself, has as his goal the comforts of life, the essential comforts, should shun like the plague these fastidious and squeamish humors. I would admire a soul with different levels, which could be both tense and relaxed, which would be well off wherever fortune might take it, which could chat with a neighbor about his building, his hunting, and his lawsuit, and keep up an enjoyable conversation with a carpenter and a gardener. I envy those who know how to be familiar with the humblest of their retinue and carry on a conversation with their own servants. And I do not like Plato's advice, always to talk to our servants, whether male or female, in masterful terms, without playfulness, and without familiarity. For besides the reason I have given, it is inhuman and unjust to make so much of this accidental privilege of fortune, and the administrations which admit the least disparity between servants and masters seem to me the most equitable. Others study how to elevate their minds and hoist them up tight. I, how to humble mine and lay it to rest. It is defective only when it reaches out. You tell of Aeacus' line, and wars men waged by sacred Troy. How much a cask of Chian wine will cost us, or what servant boy will heat my bath, or when whose bed will keep out cold, you leave unsaid. Thus, as the Lacedaemonian valor needed moderation and the soft and gracious notes of the flute to soothe it in war, for fear it should fling itself into recklessness and fury, whereas all other nations ordinarily use shrill and powerful sounds and voices that arouse and inflame the courage of the soldiers to the utmost. Similarly, it seems to me, contrary to the usual opinion, that in using our minds we have more need, for the most part, of lead than of wings, of coolness and repose than of ardor and agitation. Above all, in my opinion, it is thoroughly playing the fool to act knowing among those who are not, to speak always formally, favear in punta di forchetta, to talk on the point of a fork. You must stoop to the level of the people you are with, and sometimes affect ignorance. Lay aside your strength and subtlety. In common usage it is enough to retain order. For the rest, crawl along the ground if they want. Learned men are prone to stumble over this stone. They are always parading their mastery and scattering their book learning on all sides. In these days, they have poured it so hard into the boudoirs and ears of the ladies, that if they have not retained its substance, at least they have the appearance of it. For every sort of subject and matter, however humble and commonplace, they use a novel and learned manner of speaking and writing. Thus they express their fears, thus they outpour anger, joy, secrets of the soul. What more? They copulate in learned style. Juvenal. They quote Plato and St. Thomas in matters where the first comer would make as good a witness. The learning that could not reach their mind remains on their tongue. If the well-born ladies will take my advice, they will content themselves with displaying their own natural riches. They conceal and cover up their own beauties under foreign beauties. It is very simple-minded to put out your own light so as to shine by a borrowed light. They are buried and entombed under art right out of a bandbox. Seneca. The reason is that they do not know themselves well enough. The world has nothing more beautiful. It is for them to do honor to the arts and to decorate decoration. What do they need but to live beloved and honored? They possess and know only too much for this. They need only arouse a little and rekindle the faculties that are in them. When I see them intent on rhetoric, astrology, logic, and similar drugs, so vain and useless for their needs, I begin to fear that the men who advise them to do this do so as a means of gaining authority over them under this pretext. For what other excuse could I find for them? Enough that, without our help, they can adjust the charm of their eyes to gaiety, severity, or sweetness, season and know with harshness, uncertainty, or encouragement, and that they need no interpreter for the speeches we make in courting them. With this knowledge they hold the whip hand and master the schoolmasters and the school. If, however, it vexes them to yield to us in any matter whatever, and if they want out of curiosity to have a share in book learning, poetry is an amusement suited to their needs. It is a wanton and subtle art in fancy dress, wordy, all pleasure, all show, like themselves. They will also derive various benefits from history and philosophy, from the part that is useful for life. They will take the lessons that will train them to judge our humors and characteristics, to defend themselves against our treacheries, to control the impetuosity of their own desires, to husband their freedom, to prolong the pleasures of life, and to bear humanly the inconstancy of a lover, the rudeness of a husband, and the annoyance of years and wrinkles, and things of that sort. That is the most I should assign to them in the matter of learning. There are private, retiring, and inward natures. My essential pattern is suited to communication and revelation. I am all in the open and in full view, born for company and friendship. The solitude that I love and preach is primarily nothing but leading my feelings and thoughts back to myself, restraining and shortening not my steps, but my desires and my cares, abandoning solicitude for outside things, and mortally avoiding servitude and obligations, and not so much for the press of people as the press of business. Solitude of place, to tell the truth, rather makes me stretch and expand outward. I throw myself into affairs of state and into the world more readily when I am alone. At the door or in the crowd I withdraw and contract into my skin. The crowd drives me back to myself, and I never entertain myself so madly, licentiously, and privately as in places full of respect and ceremonious prudence. Our follies do not make me laugh, our wisdom does. By nature, I am not an enemy to the bustle of courts. I have spent part of my life in them, and I am built to get along cheerfully in large companies, provided it is at intervals and at my own times. But that indolence of taste that I have been speaking of attaches me forcibly to solitude, even at home, in the midst of a numerous household and as many visitors as anywhere. I see enough people there, but rarely those with whom I like to converse, and I there reserve, both for myself and for others, an unusual freedom. There we have a truce on ceremony, on waiting on people and escorting them here and away, and other such troublesome prescriptions of our code of manners. Oh, what a servile and bothersome practice! Everyone there behaves as he pleases. Anyone who wants to communes with his own thoughts. I remain mute, dreamy, and locked up in my thoughts, without my guests taking offense. The men whose society intimacy I seek are those who are called talented gentlemen. The idea of them spoils my taste for the others. It is, if you take it rightly, the rarest type among us, and a type that is chiefly due to nature. The object of this association is simply intimacy, fellowship, and conversation. Exercise of minds without any other fruit. In our talks all subjects are alike to me. I do not care if there is neither weight nor depth in them. Charm and pertinency are always there. Everything is imbued with mature and constant good sense, and mingled with kindness, frankness, gaiety, and friendliness. It is not only on the subject of lineal substitutions or the affairs of kings that our mind shows its beauty and strength. It shows it as much in private confabulations. I know my men even by their silence and their smiles, and perhaps find out more about them at table than in the council chamber. Hippomachus used to say shrewdly that he knew good wrestlers by seeing them just walk in the street. If learning is pleased to enter our conversation, she will not be turned out. She will not be magisterial, overbearing, and troublesome, as she usually is, but subordinate and docile. We seek only to pass the time. When it is time to be instructed and preached at, we will go and find her on her throne. Let her stoop to our level just for once, if she will, for, useful and desirable as she is, even so I suppose that in a pinch we could perfectly well get along without her completely, and do our business without her. A well-born mind that is practiced in dealing with men makes itself thoroughly agreeable by itself. Art is nothing else but the list and record of the productions of such minds. Another pleasant association for me is that of beautiful and well-bred women, for we too have practiced eyes. Cicero. If the soul has not so much to enjoy here as in the first association, the bodily senses, which conversely take a greater part in this one, bring it to a proportion close to the other, though in my opinion not equal. But it is an association in which we must keep a bit on guard, especially those in whom the body has much power, as in my case. I burned myself at it in my youth, and suffered all the furies that the poets say come upon all those who let themselves go after women without restraint and without judgment. It is true that this whiplash has since been a lesson to me. A Greek who from Capharean rock sailed safe away, never again into Euboean seas will stray. Ovid. It is madness to fasten all our thoughts upon it and to become involved in a furious and reckless passion. But on the other hand, to go into it without love and without binding our will, like actors, to play the standard role of our age and customs, and to put into it nothing of our own but the words, that is indeed providing for our safety, but in cowardly fashion, like a man who would abandon his honor, his profit, or his pleasure for fear of danger. For it is certain that from such a relationship those who form it can hope for no fruit that will please or satisfy a noble soul. We must have really desired what we expect to get real pleasure from enjoying. I say this even though fortune may unjustly reward a passionate mask, as happens often, because there is not a woman, however ill-favored she may be, who does not think herself quite attractive, and who does not think well of her youth, or her laugh, or her graceful movements. For there are no absolutely ugly women, any more than there are absolutely beautiful ones, and the Brahmin girls who have nothing else to recommend them go to the marketplace when the people have been assembled by the public crier for this purpose, and display their matrimonial parts, to see if in this respect at least they are not good enough to get a husband. Consequently, there is not one who does not let herself be easily persuaded by the first vow a man takes to be true to her. Now, the necessary outcome of this common and ordinary treachery of the men of today is what experience is already showing us, that they rally and fall back upon themselves or each other to escape us, or even that they too, for their part, fall in line with this example that we give them, play their part in the farce, and lend themselves to this negotiation, without passion, without interest, and without love, unsusceptible to passion, whether their own or another's. Tacitus. They think, following the argument of Lysias and Plato, that they can give themselves up to us more profitably and conveniently the less we love them. It will turn out as it does in plays. The public will have as much pleasure in it as the comedians, or more. For my part, I no more recognize Venus without Cupid than maternity without offspring. They are things that lend and owe their essence to each other. Thus, this cheating recoils on the man who does it. It does not cost him much, but he gets nothing worthwhile out of it either. Those who made Venus a goddess regarded her chief beauty as incorporeal and spiritual, but the beauty that these people seek is not so much as human or even brutish. The animals do not want it so gross and so earthy. We see that imagination and desire often heat them and excite them before the body does. We see in both sexes that among the crowd they pick and choose for their affections, that they have bonds of enduring fondness for each other. Even those to whom old age denies bodily vigor still tremble, nay, and quiver with love. We see them before the act, full of hope and ardor, and when the body has played its game, still reveling in the sweetness of this memory. And we see some who swell with pride when they have finished, and who, weary and sated, give out songs of glee and triumph at their deed. Anyone who has only to relieve his body of natural necessity has no reason for troubling others with such elaborate preparations. That is no meat for a gross and coarse hunger. Being one who does not ask to be thought better than I am, I will say this about the errors of my youth, not only because of the danger to health, and yet I did not manage well enough to escape having 2 touches of it, slight, however, and incipient. But also out of scorn I did not addict myself much to venal and public intimacies. I wanted to make the pleasure keener by difficulty, by desire, and by a certain glory, and I liked the way of Emperor Tiberius, who in his love affairs was won by modesty and noble birth as much as by any other quality, and the whim of the courtesan Flora, who lent herself to no one less than a dictator or a consul or a censor, and took her pleasure in the dignity of her lovers. Certainly pearls and brocade add to the pleasure, and titles and retinue. Moreover, I used to set great store by the mind, but only provided the body was not deficient. For, to answer in all conscience, if beauty of one or the other had necessarily to be lacking, I would have chosen sooner to give up the mental. It has its use in better things, but in the matter of love, a matter which is chiefly concerned with sight and touch, you can do something without the graces of the mind, nothing without the graces of the body. Beauty is the real advantage of the ladies. It is so much their own that ours, though it demands somewhat different characteristics, is at its best only when indistinguishable from theirs, boyish and beardless. They say that at the court of the Grand Turk, the youths that serve him on account of their beauty, whose number is infinite, are dismissed at the latest at 22. Reason, wisdom, and the offices of friendship are oftener found among men, therefore they govern the affairs of the world. These 2 kinds of association are accidental and dependent on others. One is annoying by its rarity, the other withers with age. Thus they would not have provided well enough for the needs of my life. Association with books, which is the 3rd kind, is much more certain and more our own. It yields the other advantages to the first 2, but it has for its share the constancy and ease of its service. It is at my side throughout my course, and accompanies me everywhere. It consoles me in old age and in solitude. It relieves me on the weight of a tedious idleness. It releases me at any time from disagreeable company. It dulls the pangs of sorrow, unless they are extreme and overpowering. To be diverted from a troublesome idea, I need only have recourse to books. They easily turn my thoughts to themselves and steal away the others. And yet, they do not rebel at seeing that I seek them out only for want of those other pleasures that are more real, lively, and natural. They always receive me with the same expression. He may well go on foot, they say, who leads his horse by the bridle, and our James, King of Naples and Sicily, who, handsome, young, and healthy, had himself carried around the country on a stretcher, lying on a wretched feather pillow, dressed in a gown of grey cloth with a cap to match. Meanwhile, followed by great regal pomp, litters, hand-led horses of all sorts, gentlemen and officers, showed an austerity still weak and wavering. The sick man is not to be pitied who has a cure up his sleeve. In the practice and application of this maxim, which is very true, lies all the fruit I reap from books. Actually, I use them scarcely any more than those who do not know them at all. I enjoy them as misers enjoy treasures, because I know that I can enjoy them when I please. My soul takes its fill of contentment from this bright possession. I do not travel without books, either in peace or in war. However many days will pass, and even some months, without my using them. I'll do it soon, I say, or tomorrow, or when I please. Time flies and is gone, meanwhile, without hurting me. For I cannot tell you what ease and repose I find when I reflect that they are at my side to give me pleasure at my own time, and when I recognize how much assistance they bring to my life. It is the best provision I have found for this human journey, and I am extremely sorry for men of understanding who do not have it. I sooner accept any other kind of amusement, however trivial, because this one cannot fail me. When at home, I turn aside a little more often to my library, from which at one sweep I command a view of my household. I am over the entrance. I see below me my garden, my farmyard, my courtyard, and into most of the parts of my house. There I leaf through, now one book, now another, without order and without plan, by disconnected fragments. One moment I muse, another moment I set down or dictate, walking back and forth, these fancies of mine that you see here. It is on the third floor of a tower. The first is my chapel, the second a bedroom and dressing room, where I often sleep in order to be alone. Above it is a great wardrobe. In the past it was the most useless place in my house. In my library I spend most of the days of my life, and most of the hours of the day. I am never there at night. Adjoining it is a rather elegant little room in which a fire may be laid in winter, very pleasantly lighted by a window. And if I feared the trouble no more than the expense, the trouble that drives me from all business, I could easily add on to each side a gallery 100 paces long and 12 wide, on the same level, having found all the walls raised, for another purpose, to the necessary height. Every place of retirement requires a place to walk. My thoughts fall asleep if I make them sit down. My mind will not budge unless my legs move it. Those who study without a book are all in the same boat. The shape of my library is round, the only flat side being the part needed for my table and chair, and curving around me it presents at a glance all my books, arranged in 5 rows of shelves on all sides. It offers rich and free views in the 3 directions, and 16 paces of free space in diameter. In winter I am not there so continually, for my house is perched on a little hill, as its name indicates, and contains no room more exposed to the winds than this one, which I like for being a little hard to reach and out of the way, for the benefit of the exercise as much as to keep the crowd away. There is my throne. I try to make my authority over it absolute, and to withdraw this one corner from all society, conjugal, filial, and civil. Everywhere else I have only a verbal authority, essentially divided. Sorry the man, to my mind, who has not in his own home a place to be all by himself, to pay his court privately to himself, to hide. Ambition pays its servants well by keeping them ever on display, like a statue in a marketplace. Great fortune is great slavery, Seneca. Even their privy is not private. I have found nothing so harsh in the austere life that our monks practice as this, that I observe in the orders of these men a rule to be perpetually in company, and to have numbers of others present for any action whatsoever. I find it measurably more endurable to be always alone than never to be able to be alone. If anyone tells me that it is degrading the muses to use them only as a plaything and a pastime, he does not know, as I do, the value of pleasure, play, and pastime. I would almost say that any other aim is ridiculous. I live from day to day, and without wishing to be disrespectful, I live only for myself. My purposes go no further. In my youth, I studied for ostentation, later, a little to gain wisdom, now for recreation, never for gain. As for the vain and spendthrift fancy I had for that sort of furniture, not just to supply my needs, but to go 3 steps beyond, for the purpose of lining and decorating my walls, I have given it up long ago. Books have many charming qualities for those who know how to choose them, but no blessing without a drawback. It is a pleasure that is no clearer or purer than the others. It has its disadvantages, and very weighty ones. The mind is exercised in books, but the body, whose care I have not forgotten either, remains meanwhile inactive, droops and grieves. I know of no excess more harmful to me, or more to be avoided in my declining years. Those are my 3 favorite and particular occupations. I will not speak of those that I owe the world out of civic duty.